Whenever I make my philosophy videos, there is quite a bit of research. If you haven't seen my channel before, I take all different philosophy information and make it a little bit more palatable and make it make sense. A lot of other people do this, and there's quite a few talented writers out there that have written other articles where they're doing lots of back research, like myself, and they are making it applied philosophy. So who's ready? Are you ready? Let's do some applied philosophy today. Wherever you are, whoever you are, please know that I'm so glad you're here with me today. And wherever you're at on your journey, just know you weren't led this far to be dropped right now. Amen. Let's have a great day. I noticed something during research. I noticed a lot of things during research, but if you had no introduction to philosophy and you were introduced to some terms without any background, what would that look like? So I'm trying to look at things from a fresh eyes. Now, the term heuristics. Heuristics are mental shortcuts that people use to make decisions, solve problems, and form judgments. They're simple strategies that can be used by humans, animals, organizations, and machines. And we're going to use them today in terms of philosophy. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about today are example of heuristics, where you're drawing conclusions based upon other factors. Alright, so again, if you are just now hearing, let's say you heard about it from in passing, or I don't know, you heard it in some random chick's philosophy video on the internet. You go to research it, and the first thing that pulls up is this thing, Investopedia. Didn't even know that was a thing, never heard of that. And it says, heuristics are mental shortcuts for solving problems in a quick way that delivers a result that is sufficient enough to be useful given time constraints. Let's see what this is. It's kind of a strange thing. Anyways, let's get to this article then. Alright, the first article I have pulled up here is from conceptually.org under concepts, and they're delving deeper into Occam's razor. Alright, Occam's razor. What is Occam's razor? Definition and explanation. If Occam's razor brings to mind images of stubbled gentlemen and shaving cream, you're not actually that far off. Occam's razor, also known as the law of parsimony, is a philosophical tool for shaving off unlikely explanations. Essentially, when faced with competing explanations for the same phenomenon, the simplest is likely the correct one. Namesake William of Occam said the best explanation of any phenomenon is the one that makes the fewest assumptions. A statement that includes many ifs should trigger mental alarm bells. You should consider Occam's razor and investigate it further. Some argue that the scientific method was built upon the principles of Occam's razor. Underdeterminism says that for any theory in science, there will always be at least one other rival theory that could conceivably be correct. So, the scientific method uses Occam's razor in order to circumvent this issue and choose a working hypothesis. Remember, however, that Occam's razor is a heuristic, a rule of thumb to suggest which hypothesis is most likely to be true. It doesn't prove or disprove, it simply leads you down the path that's most likely to be correct. Also, simplicity is often subject to heavy debate, so you and I might come to different conclusions when faced with a decision between the same two hypotheses. Examples of Occam's razor. This principle is popular among skeptics, a group of people inclined to keep an open mind and believe only what we can sense or what can be proven scientifically. But there are plenty of examples in our everyday lives too. Occam's razor tells us that we shouldn't get sucked into a whirlpool of paranoia after scrolling through WebMD. You have a headache? Oh no, you might have the Black Death. Sure, it's true that one of the symptoms of the Black Death is a headache, but using Occam's razor, it's obviously much more likely that you're dehydrated or suffering from a common cold. Many creationists use Occam's razor to argue the existence of God. It's the simplest explanation of how the earth was created that God created it. They say. That helicopter is so distracting. Okay. Many creationists use Occam's razor to argue the existence of God. Isn't the simplest explanation of how the earth was created that God created it, they say? But atheists might counter that the existence of a divine being who created the world in just 7 days is much less simple and relies on more assumptions than the Big Bang Theory. A great example of how simplicity is in the eye of the beholder. Occam's razor is also often used to debunk conspiracy theories. Faced with the disappointing mess that is modern politics, how likely is it really that reptilian aliens have infiltrated our government? The simpler explanation is a combination of corruption, incompetence, and structural inefficiency. I know everybody was super excited to figure out what underdetermination is, so let's get into it. At the heart of the underdetermination of scientific theory by evidence is the simple idea that the evidence available to us at a given time may be insufficient to determine what beliefs we should hold in response to it. In a textbook example, if I know that you spent $10 on apples and oranges and that apples cost $1 while oranges cost $2, then I know that you did not buy 6 oranges, but I do not know whether you bought 1 orange or 8 apples, 2 oranges, and 6 apples, and so on. Let's read this thing. Hey. It's one of the internet's favorite guys. I can't believe it. I'm just now got the hang of this mic. Ugh. I wish I had more subscribers so more people can tell me like things how to use a mic. So like, share, and subscribe so I can figure out how to do this. Alright, this one is from bigthink.com. Hard science. Alright, how the Sagan standard can help you make better decisions. The noted astronomer and author Carl Sagan came up with a famous dictum acronymed ECRI. Carl Sagan famously shared the aphorism, extraordinary claims. I wish I could do that. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This approach can help us fight off fake information. Scientific thinkers in centuries before Carl Sagan also expressed similar sentiment. Yeah, but he made it sound cool. Is there an omnipotent, all-knowing entity, otherwise known as God, ruling our daily affairs and caring enough to judge our behaviors on an individual basis? Or is our life ruled by an invisible supercomputer that preordains most of our actions, ensuring an impenetrable veil between us and reality, preventing all knowledge of the true nature of things? Or maybe there are advanced aliens out there. What if all of them are true? Either responsible for guiding our meager attempts at civilizing, or simply using us as guinea pigs in some incomprehensible experiment. Whatever it is that is really going on, the late astronomer Carl Sagan coined an aphorism to deal with such grand proposals. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, asserted Sagan in what has become known as the Sagan standard. The same can also be referred to by the aphorism's acronym ECRI. I don't know how people normally pronounce it. I don't know. I feel like I can't hardly pronounce anything the correct English way. Especially in Canada. Hi. While Sagan made the statement popular on his Cosmos show of the 1980s, he wasn't necessarily the one who came up with the idea entirely on his own. Historians have pointed to a similar thought expressed by 1899 by the Swiss psychologist Theodore Flournoy, who stated that the weight of evidence for an extraordinary claim must be proportioned to its strangeness. I like that. Oh my gosh. He's like clawing at my leg. Flournoy, in his turn, actually based his idea on an 1814 saying by the French scientist and philosopher Pierre-Simon Laplace, who said we ought to examine seemingly inexplicable phenomenon with an intention all the more scrupulous as it appears more difficult to admit them. There he is. Looks very Andrew Jackson-y in the nose. 19th century portrait. Other historians even go farther back, seeing the roots of this kind of thinking in 18th century critiques of magic by people like the Scottish philosopher David Hume, who wrote in 1748, "A wise man proportions his belief to the evidence, and no testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle, unless the testimony be of such a kind that its falsehood would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish." Oh my gosh, that is so wordy. I barely absorbed all that. Certainly, while there are large amounts of humans who still believe in actual miracles, we are also constantly bombarded by claims of both scientific and unscientific nature that beggar belief. ECRI can be a useful tool to keep in mind next time you encounter an outlandish political statement, a deepfake video, or an unprovable claim of a cure for cancer or alien sighting. How do they know? How would you know? I have seen some miraculous things. I've seen very miraculous things. So, don't take outlandish statements for granted and ask for evidence. Like this one. The greater the claim, the greater the amount of evidence required to prove it. It's getting harder to spot a deepfake video. While the idea behind the Sagan standard seems intuitively clear at first glance, to our science-minding modern brains, it has been the subject of criticism. Some, like the geologist and geophysicist David Deming, have argued that Sagan's dictum doesn't really define extraordinary. After all, what is extraordinary to some depends on their level of knowledge and their beliefs. Someone who knows very little would find many things beyond ordinary. It is also true that much of what is known scientifically today was not known even 100 years ago, so certainly many claims which we generally agree upon now could be considered extraordinary by previous generations. What this results in is the popular concept that has been used to bolster up orthodoxy and discredit innovation and research into science anomalies or even mainstream hypotheses, which have much empirical evidence. Still, keep that in mind. It can be a useful tool in these extraordinary times. I really have seen some extraordinary things. I've seen miraculous healing many times, and that are being studied from some of the miracles that I've seen. I've seen things work out in incredibly strange ways. I try to document as much phenomenon as possible. I didn't even plan to get into all this on here, but it only makes sense because, I mean, I'm open to explanations on some of the things I've seen that can only be defined as miracles. What did I want to show you next? I'm remembering something there for a second. Should have stopped to write it down. I don't remember. Is it Reid? Yes. Yeah. And birthday's my sister. Looks like there's already been some YouTube videos on him already. Why is Thomas Reid my favorite philosopher? Oh, let's see what Stanford has to say about him. He's listed under Plato. Maybe that's just what they call their whole philosophy thing. Okay. Get that distinguished Scottish gentleman. Thomas Reid, 1710 to 1796, is a Scottish philosopher best known for his philosophical method, his theory of perception and its wide implications on epistemology, and as the developer and defender of an agent-causal theory of free will. In these and other areas, he offers perceptive and important criticisms of the philosophy of Locke, Berkeley, and especially Hume. He is also well known for his criticism of Locke's view of personal identity and Hume's view of causation. Reid also made influential contributions to philosophical topics, including ethics, aesthetics, and the philosophy of mind. The legacy of Thomas Reid's philosophical work is found in contemporary theories of perception, free will, philosophy of religion, and widely in epistemology. After studying at the University of Aberdeen, Reid entered the ministry in New Makar in 1737. In 1748, he published a short essay entitled An Essay on Quantity, concerning Hutcheson's inquiry into the origin of our ideas of beauty and virtue. Although this was his only published work, he was given a professorship at King's College, Aberdeen in 1752. Wouldn't that be nice? You just publish one thing and they're like, please come teach everybody what you know. Okay. There he published an inquiry into the human mind on the principles of common sense, or IHM, in 1764. Later he received a prestigious profession. Later, he received a prestigious professorship at the University of Glasgow. He resigned from this position in 1781 in order to give himself more time to write, and published Essays on the Intellectual Powers of Man, or EIP, in 1785, and Essays on the Active Powers of Man, or EAP, in 1788. These 3 books, along with 4 additional books composed of papers, essays, and more, have been recently republished in the Edinburgh edition of Thomas Reid. In The Inquiry, a methodology pioneering work due to its extensive and rigorous use of observational data to justify claims about perception, Reid examines each of the 5 senses and discusses the ways in which we achieve knowledge of the world by employing them. Intellectual Powers expands his system beyond the apprehension of the world through the senses to consideration of memory, imagination, knowledge, the nature of judgment, reasoning, and taste. The Active Powers examines a collection of topics concerning ethics, the nature of agency generally, and the distinctive features of human agency. And I think he didn't have the vocabulary as we would to describe what I would have only the descriptive word as the cloud or whatever. Or like the Akashic record or Godhead, or there's many different names of that, but I think that's what he was trying. And to me, what I'm understanding of it is when he's talking about where our expands the systems beyond the apprehension of the world to the senses to consider memory, reasoning, and taste. This implies so much more than we are, a meat bag hanging out on a rock and things like that. This is acknowledging, to me, this is one of the, there are several different philosophers that can lead you towards or against God, and for myself, it was, I do believe in a higher power, a deity, not important for this, what my personal thing, but this philosopher, for example, does make a argument for there's something outside of ourselves that is more than just this physical plane. We have this whole experience, and not what is that experience, and he really digs into that. And let me see if there's any more. There's so much good stuff in here. Let's see. What is it? I'm looking for this thing he does. What is it like? It's about color, theory of memory. What is it? I can't remember. I love how I'm just doing this on the fly. The conundrum of Reid's philosophy. Let's just do something simple. Did I finish reading all these articles that I wanted to? I think so. In his moral theory, Reid attempts to draw from the rationalist tradition of Samuel Clarke and Richard Price, and from the sentimentalist tradition of David Hume and Adam Smith. As a result, his conception of the relationship between moral motivation and moral action is complex and difficult to unify. Motives appear to Reid to be both the ends for which we act and the mental states that prompt our active behavior. In the first of the two passages below, both draw from active powers. Reid implies that moral judgments about an action are not necessarily connected to any moral motivation, while in the second, he asserts that moral judgments about an action are necessarily connected to moral motivation. A judge, from a regard to justice and to the duty of his office, dooms a criminal to die, while from humanity or particular affection, he desires that he should live. The determination of the mind may be not to do what we desire to do. I'm very apt to think, with Dr. Price, that in intelligent beings, the desire of what is good and aversion to what is ill is necessarily connected with the intelligent nature, and that which is a contradiction to suppose such a being to have the notion of good without the desires of it, or the notion of ill without the aversion to it. One means by which to interpret these passages is through the lens of teleological and theistic account of moral perception. On this model, when we are functioning properly in the environments for which God designed us, then moral judgments are accompanied by moral motivations to act. However, this connection will fail in those who are damaged or poorly designed. For example, psychopaths suffer impairment in emotional response. Psychopaths can know certain of their behaviors are outside standard morality and yet not be motivated to alter their behavior. This and the proper function interpretation of the relationship or the relation between moral judgment and moral motivation is suggested in Reid's remark about the depraved. Nor can we conceive a greater depravity in the heart of man than it would be to see and acknowledge worth without feeling any respect to it, or to see and acknowledge the highest worthlessness without any degree of dislike or indignation. Reid's account of moral motivation exemplifies his philosophical style in general, which eschews a priori speculation, the crafting of universal generalizations. Ooh, it's back to that we were talking about a while ago. And necessary and sufficient conditions in favor of keeping close to his observations of others and his introspection about himself. In the present context, Reid's account of moral motivation does not endorse any universal generalizations about what does and does not motivate us to moral action. With its sacrifices and philosophical clarity, it perhaps gains in its ability to respond to real-life cases. For example, or for more on Reid's moral philosophy, see Reid's Ethics. Well, I think y'all have probably had enough of that for today. Let me get out.